Allah, Allah. Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. Thanks for the North Africa Demon organizers for giving us the opportunity to speak on front of you. And welcome to this session where we are going to talk about how to prepare for your Salesforce certifications. And then we will take the example of SAML, which is one of the most, let's say, complicated topics to understand because there are a lot of stacks of information. So my name is Mustafa Al-Hassak. I'm a senior technical architect at Salesforce Morocco. And this is my colleague Zakaria Samari, who is a senior technical consultant working with me at Salesforce Morocco. So no product features today, no new announcements. So I'm just going to skip the forward-looking statements. But we want to make sure that you understand that we are part of Salesforce, but we don't in any way speak on behalf of the Trailhead certification team. So what we are going to say today is only based on our experiences and expertise on passing certifications. Okay, so what are we going to see today? Let's check the agenda. First, we will start with introductions. I think you might have a simple question: why should you should listen to us? So we are going to share with you some expertise and some numbers about our journey on Salesforce. And then you can judge by yourself if you can listen to us or you can just skip the information we're going to tell today. Then we will talk about the 3 approaches that we use for certifications. This is based on our experience, and this is what we use to pass certifications, and sometimes to fail certifications. And finally, we will talk about, the approaches we'll move from theory to practice because the approaches are not that easy to understand, but when applied to an example from one specific certification, it might make sense to all of you. Okay? So introductions, who we are. I was introduced to the Salesforce ecosystem in 2014 when I joined Currency and Consulting. This is where I passed my very first Salesforce certification, and I became certified administrator. 3 years later, I started passing the architecture certifications, and this is where I became a certified application architect. Then 1 year later, I tackled the other parts of the certifications of architecture, and I became system certified in 2018. And this is when I started my coaching, CTA coaching sessions at Salesforce. And I had my very first attempt, and I failed. This was the first review board. It was in 2020. And 6 months later, I had my certified technical architect, and I had a pass in 2021. Thank you. And now, to you, Zakaria.
Let's do the switch. Okay, from my side, I joined Salesforce, the whole ecosystem, back in 2019, in September to be precise. I first got my admin certification, like I think almost everyone here. Moving on, I managed to be all 5. All 5 is, we mean by that is the admin, the app builder, the sales cloud, the service cloud, and the advanced admin. Then it was the time to start tackling the developer certifications. By that I mean the developer 1, developer 2, and also the JavaScript developer 1. Moving on, again following the logical path, I decided to start tackling the architecture certifications. The first milestone was the application architect, and this was last year. And then this year, I started to aim for the system architect's milestone. And super recently, I managed to pass this one, the identity and access management, which is relevant to our topic today. Moving on, let's talk some numbers, because it's all about numbers. So some numbers explaining why you should listen to us, Mustafa and I. So the first number is the years of experience. We combined have 16 years of experience. We also have, let's say, a lot of Trailhead badges. Then we have combined 30 certifications, including the Super CTA of Mustafa. We have 11 published articles. By published articles, we mean the release note summaries that we run together. and also some Salesforce experimentations from time to time. And by the way, we do this not only as True, but with Manal and Umayma. Okay, moving on, we combined have 42 projects. I think we have only one project in common. And the most important statistic is we have 4 failed certifications. This is key because through those failed certifications, we have learned the approaches that we will share today. So let's talk about the 3 approaches. So if I can give you a little bit of taste of the secret sauce, we are following 3 approaches. The first of all, to prepare better for a better structure of the preparation, is Disimplify. The idea behind this is that behind every complex topic, no matter what it is, there is a combination of simple things, simple ideas to understand first. Then the second approach is to diversify. And I can relate to this a lot because during my preparation, at least for the few first certifications, I did only the trail mix. After that, I assumed I was ready, and then I passed this certification. And this is not the best way because I did fail the platform developer too. Then the last approach is the zoom out. What we mean by that is that the architecture is more broad than only Salesforce. Salesforce is only a small piece of the puzzle. And the idea is to combine between all of those 3. But before we do so, let's deep dive into the first one, the simplify approach. So as I did mention, we have a complex topic in front of us. What we need to do is to find out the simple ideas, simple things behind it. So an analogy to explain this is, let's imagine this bulb as a complex topic, for example, SAML. You know, they say divide and conquer. So we need to divide this into multiple sections first, tackle each one of those, and then see what we can do later on. But first, yeah, we divided this. Let's focus on the first section. The section itself can be complex because remember, this is SAML. This, as Mustafa will mention, a lot of the architects, including me, is struggling with. Therefore, it's okay to divide this section itself into multiple topics. Then again, we can focus on a specific topic. The topic itself, we will repeat the same process until we find the smallest things possible to understand. The next step after all of this is to combine between all of those ideas, connect the dots, go back to the original topic, which now should make sense. We will do this also for the other topics inside the section, focus on each one of those, and then connect the dots until the section itself will become clearer. We will do this also for the next section, following the same logic until it becomes clear. Also for the others, start connecting all of the dots between the major sections of this specific topic that we are trying to understand, and then the whole topic or the whole complex topic will sound a lot simpler than it initially was. This is easy on paper, right? I don't think so, because this approach alone won't work. You need to combine it with the other 2. So talking about the other 2, let's talk about the Diversify. So as I did mention, I used only to focus on the trail mix, not even read the exam guide, and go for the certification. So after sharing also this with Mustafa and him sharing his ideas with me, we decided to combine all of, let's say, recommended steps to follow for the preparation in some sort of a map. The first step is the exam guide. The exam guide is super important because you will find what we call the exam outline section. In there, you will find all of the goals tackled by this exam. And this is actually a good starting point to start identifying these sections that I did mention, because when talking on a complex topic, it's difficult to identify the sections themselves. Then move on, it's okay to tackle the trail mix. The Trailhead team already is doing an amazing job making things simpler for us. And then you might I get tired through reading, so it's okay to maybe watch some online courses, free videos, the awesome community we have. Then one important thing to note is trying, because reading, watching is not enough. You need to get your hands dirty through trying. You can get a developer.org edition for free. And you can try 99% of all of the features in Salesforce out there. You should also remember to take notes, your own personal notes, because through taking notes, they will be also beneficial even after passing the certification, because you will need always to go back to them when you are tackling something that you did study before but don't remember exactly. Also talking about the awesome community that we have, you should also discuss what you have learned, what you are learning, maybe share this with others. And also using the community, it's okay to ask. There is no shame in asking. I always ask my colleagues at Salesforce whenever I face an issue or a challenge, or maybe just need a second opinion. One cool thing that we recommend as well is listening. Listening to podcasts specifically, because it doesn't require a lot of energy. You can just sit there, listen to something maybe while doing an activity of your own, even before bedtime, I should say. And then the last thing is doing what we are doing now, presenting, because through presenting, there is more pressure to be more prepared. There is more pressure to present something credible to the audience. And one last thing, so this is all of the steps that we are seeing as a recommendation, is that you don't have to follow them in a singular path. You can switch from one to another, depending again on how you want to study. But the starting point should always be the exam guide, and specifically the exam outline section. Okay, hopefully it will make sense. Let's move on to the last approach, zooming out. So again, what we did mean by this is that when it comes to the various concepts that you will learn specifically on the architecture certifications, design certifications, they are not unique to Salesforce. Salesforce didn't come up with the SAML. It's a long topic that existed way before. Therefore, the knowledge is spread across a large universe, and Salesforce is only a small part of it. Therefore, you can take a look at SAML from other platforms, other actors' perspective as well. With that, now we tasted the secret sauce. Let's see how we can apply all of this in SAML with Mustafa. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Zakaria. I know this is a lot of theory, so now let's apply it to one concrete example. This is the problem with junior people. They just tell you about stuff, they don't know the reality of the field. Okay, SAML example. So anyone, let me just take one step back. Anyone studying for the identity and access management certification, at some point they will have to struggle with SAML, OAuth, etc. And we have taken SAML as an example because it's much easier to grasp, much easier to define topics. Maybe it will be much more difficult when you are tackling OAuth or something like that. But let's take just SAML as an example, and then you can do the extrapolation for the other subjects. So going back to the simplification, like I said, behind every complex topic, there is a combination of simple things. And let's see how this applies to SAML. So let's suppose that this house is SAML. This is what you are trying to understand. And like said by Zakaria, you need to put this into 4 different topics. And then from those 4 different topics, once you understand them, you can build up the house and build up your understanding. So first thing you will find out is that you need to understand what is single sign-on. When you want to understand SAML, SAML is a single sign-on mechanism. So let's first understand what is single sign-on before going to the technology itself. And then you will see that there is something called SAML bindings. So you need to understand that too. Then you will hear something about some SAML assertions that are being sent by the server. So you need to understand that. And finally, SAML flows, because there are multiple flows, identity and server provider flows, etc. So in single sign-on itself, as you can see, it's a topic on itself. You cannot just say, OK, now I get it. You need to go to the details to understand how it works behind the scenes. And for that, you will need to tackle authentication basics. Single sign-on is all about authentication. So what is authentication? And then you go on and, OK, authentication. And you see that people are confusing authentication and authorization. So let's understand what is the difference between the two. Then you will hear about that SAML is a federated authentication. OK, what is federated and what is the difference between delegated? And as you can see, each time you try to understand something, you will find out that there are much complex and there are simpler things to understand first, and then you can go back to the first section. And once you understand those three, okay, now I got the authentication basics. So what is an identity provider? You will say that SAML, there is an identity provider and a service provider. So let's understand those two again. And once you got all these, you can say, okay, now I connect the dots, I know what is single sign-on. Let's move to the next topic. And this time it will be SAML bindings, and you will hear about HTTP direct bindings and HTTP posts. So you need to go back to HTTP status codes to see what is HTTP, how does it work, why we talk about status codes, what is posting and redirection, etc. And again, you will hear about SAML assertions, and this is where you start hearing things like digital signatures. So again, what is a digital signature? You find it's all about hashing. Okay, what is hashing? What is the difference between hashing and encryption? And encryption itself, there's symmetric and asymmetric encryption. And when you hear symmetric, there's a public key and private key, etc. So I think you got the idea. It's each time you deep dive on a topic, there are other topics you need to understand, and you just keep going on and on until you find a simple thing that you can understand. And then you build up until you find out the big stuff, which is SAML assertion, then SAML flows, and from there you can build up the house, and then you see the whole picture. And once you connect all these dots, you can come back to the SAML itself, and you say, now I understand SAML, I can move to the next topic of identity and access management. Okay? So this was simplification. Now when you find those topics that you need to understand, so you need to gather the knowledge. And gathering the knowledge, this is where you use the diversification. The idea is to not stick to one source of knowledge, because first of all, it might be wrong. So you may take knowledge from the wrong place. And secondly, because it's always much easier to consume different kind of mediums. So reading, listening, watching, etc. So for SAML, this is what we have done with Zakaria. So exam guide is always your first starting point. You don't want to start studying for the certification without checking the exam guide, especially the exam outline. And to tell you how the exam outline is important, you need to know that the certification team, when they want to create a certification, the first thing they do is they create the exam outline. So they say this certification is for people to prove that they know these specific topics. And they say, okay, anyone who wants to pass the identity access management certification is someone who needs to prove that he has knowledge of identity management concepts, accepting third-party identities, etc. And once they build up this exam outline, this is why they send these to the experts, and they tell them, please create questions that validate these concepts or these topics. And this is why the exam outline, any question in any Salesforce certification is tied to one of the exam outline sections. There is no way you will find a certification where there's a question that has nothing to do with the exam outline. Then you check the trail mix. So trail mix is kind of your map. So you want to start with the trail mix, so you don't go too far from the topics that are handled by the certification. But again, from time to time, you come back to the trail mix to understand, okay, now I finished this part, I need to go this one, just to guide you through the process. And obviously, there is one for identity access management. Then you have official documentation. And this is very important because this is your single source of truth. If you have any doubts, if you see any contradictions on the web between people talking in forums or in videos or blog posts, the single source of truth is Salesforce official documentation, because it's always updated, it's always refreshed to the last release of Salesforce. And also people talking in communities, etc., you don't really know how far they know about the features, so you cannot trust them 100%. And also we might find some videos and blog posts that are very old, so they are not updated with the latest releases. Next, watching videos. I think we all know how it's easy to consume videos. It's much easier than reading documentation. So from time to time, when you're tired, you can just Google something or YouTube it. For example, this is a page from first page of YouTube when you type in Salesforce SAML, and it shows you stuff like that. So fifth one is, like said by Zakaria, get your hands dirty, try it yourself. Go grab a Salesforce developer org. You can even grab two. You can configure one as identity provider, the other one as service provider. And you can try stuff. You can check the network, how the things are exchanged, how digital certificates are used, how the assertions are generated, etc. Then we have the opportunity to discuss and ask. There is the Trailblazer community. For example, for SAML, there is a Salesforce identity group. You can go there and ask questions. Just know that you are not alone in the journey to getting the certification. So you will find many people out there asking the same exact questions. So just get there, ask your questions, maybe reply to others, learn from their mistakes or learn from their knowledge. Easiest one, I guess, listening to podcasts. You can check, this is a Google search on Salesforce podcast. As you can see, there are too many. Some for developers, some for admins, some for architects. You can go there and check any topics that are related to the certification you are preparing to. They are very easy to consume because you can do them while doing something else. So the videos, you need to stay there and watch them. While the podcasts, you can do it while you are working out or while you are cooking or before going to sleep, etc. And the last one, I guess the most powerful one, is presenting to the others. So you can go to Trailblazer community. There is a page where you can search for groups that are nearby you. And from there, you can volunteer to present a session to the group. And then you can learn more about topic. Why? Because it's, do you ever have this feeling of understanding something, and when somebody asks you a question, you struggle to explain it? So the thing is, it was proven that by a University of Psychology in California that when you study alone and when you learn unknown, sometimes your mind is going to create a false feeling of understanding. So you think you understand something, but it's not the case. And when someone asks you the question, he enforces you to create an actual reasoning. And this is why when presenting to the others, sometimes you question yourself and you say, okay, I thought I understand this well, but now let's deep dive and find an actual reasoning so I can explain it to the others. So this was the diversification. As you can see, many diverse sources of knowledge that you can use. I guess these are not the only ones. We have come up with 8, maybe you can find another ones, okay? So zooming out. So like I said, we simplified the topic. We try to diversify our knowledge. Now let's zoom out, because SAML is nothing, not specific to Salesforce. It's a technology that was created way before. So some ways of zooming out is to check the specifications of the architecture topics. So for example, for SAML, there is a specification which is technology agnostic. It talks about the principles of SAML. And they might seem very hard to read, but after read one or two, it becomes much, much easier, because they don't use technology-specific words. It's more broad. It's easy to read, not easy to consume, but it's easy to read and to understand. And for example, for SAML, there is a website called samlxml.org where you can find the SAML specification. You can read it. Then you have YouTube again. You can just see how the other technologies are handling SAML. So you can type SAML with Java if you know a lot about Java, or I don't know, JavaScript or Python, I don't know. And you can just Google it. This is just type in SAML in YouTube, and you can see that the first two ones have nothing to do with Salesforce, because SAML is a more broad technology. Third one is read architecture books. As you know, the main source of knowledge is always the books, because in a book you can put a lot of things, not like in blog spots or in YouTube videos or podcasts. In the books, you have the author who goes really through the deep diving into the technical topics, and there are a lot of reviewers, so they review their work and it's validated. And if you go to Amazon and you type SAML, you can find something like this. So solving identity management in modern applications, and just suit yourself. And finally, check out other learning platforms. Trailhead is a Salesforce learning platform. It's free, it's very good. But sometimes you need something more, let's say, with more deep dive for architects or for developers. So this is, for example, Pluralsight. I have just typed in SAML there, and you can see at least I have two results. First one is to get started with SAML, and it has nothing to do with Salesforce. It's really to understand how SAML works before going to the technology stuff related to Salesforce. Okay, with that said, this finishes the presentation. Please file your questions. Thank you. And in the meantime, if you want to get grab of the slides, suit yourself. Questions? Omar?
Yeah, I have one. Like regarding the trial part there, I have a special topic regarding the governance. I think it's sometimes like trying when you put it on the governance part, sometimes it's not as easy. Like, what is your opinion or advice about it?
Yes, each one of those, let's say, diversification tasks, so asking questions, presenting, trying things, they don't apply to all the topics. So for example, the governance, what you can try is the technical part of the governance. So your CI/CD pipelines, your sanity checks, your static code analysis and stuff like that. But let's say the business or the functional parts of the governance, the only thing you can do is to try it with on real projects on customers. Jim?
First of all, thanks for the presentation. Basically, you have talked about the process of learning. One more factor I believe is timing. One more thing is timing. So if we keep it open, they can keep reading forever. In terms of planning, what is your recommendation?
It really depends on people. I know some people who have passed certification like 1 month and others who have done it in 4 months. So it really depends on people, how much time you want to put on studying. Also, the same person can, based on their experience. For example, for me, the integration architecture certification was very easy because I worked on a lot of projects in integration. I had a pass working with ETLs, etc. But the identity is one of the ones I failed because it was very new to me. So it really depends on people.
From my side, what I do is I try to set up a deadline, because with the deadline, there is more pressure. When it comes to the architecture certifications, and I'm sure you know about this already, the identity was the most difficult thing that I did pass. So knowing this from Mustafa and also from the community, I did plan this in advance, 2 months in advance. But of course, this is a self-estimation. It's different from one person to another.
I see that you have talked about diversifying ways to study for the certification, but you haven't talked about practice exams. And it's a way that I practice for the exam, for the certification. Like we have practice exams on focus on force, for example. Is it something that you're against, or would you vouch for this approach to pass some practice exams?
It's a question for you.
To be honest with you, I've done this before when preparing for Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, etc. But I think for the architecture certifications, you really should avoid it, because you need to, when you say, I want to become an architect, you don't want to be the kind of architect who is given 4 possible answers and he chooses one. You want to be the kind of architects who come up with the solution. And to be this kind of person, you need to learn your topics. You need to understand how they work from the basics. Even sometimes you have to go and study things that you have studied in the school and when you were not paying attention, and now you know how important they were. So you need to go back to things like, for example, for studying for the integration part, I had to go back to I don't know how it's called in French, it's the OZ model, ISO model, because this is something I've just skipped when studying, and I had to go back and understand how it works, because this helped me on building up, these layers of information, so you can understand, because technology is kind of stacked layers, right? It started in the, let's say, 60s or 70s, and today, if you want to understand anything happening today, you need to understand the full stack. So going through focus and force, it might work at the beginning, but at some point it becomes just useless, and I think also these kind of things like flashcard are not even focusing for us. There are also Salesforce dumps. We all know that on the internet. And it's really, I think you should not do this because it's even lowering the value of the certifications in the market. So now when you see someone who is admin or advanced admin, it's not like if you come back in the time 10 years ago, an admin or advanced admin was really someone who had a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. But today, someone who is certified admin or advanced admin, I won't give him my Salesforce org until I do a thorough check. Time's up. See you in the next sessions.